All right. Good morning, folks. Glad to be here once again to be a part of this with you folks, brethren in Christ. We left off last week in Revelation 13 doing that little bit of study, trying to kind of wrap our minds around who this beast is, this second beast. We looked at the first beast a few weeks ago and made some comparison, done some comparison work to see what was taking place there. What John, in fact, is trying to get across to his hearers and readers, what he's seeing in a vision. We don't do this enough, but I would like to start today's study by reading Revelation 1:1. And I think we should do this every time, just as a friendly reminder. Because, seriously, folks, the deeper you get into this book of Revelation, the more this gets overlooked in a practical manner. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants. Things which must shortly take place. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John. Did you catch what he said there in the last part of that verse? He sent and signified it. The deeper we get into the study of this book of Revelation, the more we are tempted to start naming these things. Sort of like the two witnesses. A lot of people want to name who the two witnesses are. But I think, that's sort of fun work to get involved in because it involves extensive study. But is it profitable? I mean, is it, maybe that's not a good word. Maybe I should use a different word. Of course it would be profitable, but is it the main point of the situation, the context in which it's found in Revelation 11? The two witnesses. We see the two witnesses. They're not specifically named by John as to who they are. So they're partaking in an event that John is seeing. And as we just read in Revelation 1:1, these are signified. That means they're kind of figurative in manner. John is seeing things by signs and wonders. And he's describing the signs and wonders to his audience. And as he's describing the signs and wonders to his audience, they would understand. And the ones who would not, obviously the ones who had the gift of discernment, would impart that understanding to the ones who did not entirely grasp what John was saying. It's so hard for us to kind of wrap our minds around these signs and wonders, these pictures today, because our mindset is not in a Hebrew manner, an Israelite manner. You weren't necessarily raised with the same figures of speech, the same mannerisms as they were. Or else you would understand this a lot better. Case in point, we're looking at these beasts, right? And what do you think of when you hear the word beast? You think of a big ferocious lion, Loch Ness monster, Sasquatch. There's you an idea of a beast. Okay, on the real things now. A tiger, a big man-eating tiger. You think back to the dinosaur days. Whatever. I mean, is this not what comes to your mind? Or do you think of somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer? Do you think of somebody like Hitler? Do you think of somebody like a preacher? I'm sure some of you do. That's a stupid joke, but nevertheless, what comes to mind? All right, that's obviously not what John is seeing, is it? He's not describing, though he does name a dragon in chapter 12. He's not describing some ferocious animal, is he? He's describing a corporate entity. Remember how we looked at that earlier? How could a dragon or a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns have only one mouth? You see, but he's describing an entity, a group, maybe even a movement of a group. I'm convinced that's what he's talking about, and we'll get into that as we go on. In Revelation 13 and verse 11, John says, I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Something I want to draw to your attention is how he names the origin of these two beasts. One is from the sea, okay, and then one is from the earth. Does he say either one of them is from heaven? No. Okay, that's very important for what we're going to see in verse 18. Because it keeps the same flow throughout this text. He sees this other beast coming up out of the earth, who later on in chapter 16 is called the false prophet. Let's see. Because he names Revelation 16 and verse 12. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. Verse 13, and I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast. Well, John, which beast are you talking about here? In chapter 13, you're naming 2 beasts. Wait a minute. He goes on, he says, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So what do we have here? He names the dragon from chapter 12. Then he names the sea beast as just simply the beast. But then he gives this land beast or earth beast from verse 11 and following in chapter 13. He gives it the name, the identification of the false prophet. That's why when you hear me say false prophet, it's speaking of this beast from the earth. Now, let's stop just a second here. This is what I was talking about a while ago. Do you think of a preacher when you hear the word beast? Probably not. I hope not anyway. Well, that is a true preacher. Excuse me. Preacher of the truth. All right. Do you think of a false teacher as a beast? Do you? I know the way the dispensational teaching has caused people to think of beautiful people these days. I understand it. And what C.I. Scofield has, how he's blinded the minds of honest individuals. But seriously, do you think of a beautiful person? A handsome, a whatever speaker? No, you don't. You don't think of someone who can grab the people's attention and just keep it, and even convince them that what they're worshiping is true. But yet it's happening all across the world today, all across the planet today. I got to use that word world carefully because of how we read our Bibles these days. You don't think of a person when you see the word beast. Now today we wouldn't do that, but they actually did back then. There's ancient writings that call Caesar, Nero, beast. He was a man. He was an individual. He was just a person. A wicked ruler he was, and they had the reasons for calling him a beast. You know, a short while ago we looked in Isaiah 26 and 27, and we noted how God was saying through the prophet Isaiah, he was going to punish the inhabitants of the earth in chapter 26 and verse 20. And then in chapter 27 and verse 1, he goes to proclaim that he's going to punish Leviathan. When we look back and the way that chapter 26 ends, we see that Leviathan happens to be the inhabitants of the land. They're wicked rulers. Leviathan, you'd think of Loch Ness Monster, wouldn't you? Or Behemoth, the land beast, as some people like to say. You would think of woolly mammoth, wouldn't you? Or something similar to that. You wouldn't think of a person. Practically. But these folks this was their manner of thought. That's how they thought through things. Yes, there was a beast, but the common word for beast just simply meant their ox that was plowing out in the field, or their donkey that they used to work and even to travel with. But here is this beast coming up out of the earth, the land, and he has two horns, like a lamb, and he speaks like a dragon. Well, he's obviously not describing a lamb because it says like a lamb. He uses a simile there. And it's obviously not a dragon, but it's like a dragon, isn't it? He exercises all authority of the first beast, that is the beast mentioned in chapter 13, verses 1 through 10, in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Well, we read about that already earlier. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image. I got to check something. Hold on a second. I got to make sure this is right. I cannot tell. I should have checked this earlier, but it didn't. Well, I'll find out later if it isn't working right. That's fine. Well, I cannot change it. That's okay. All right. That's okay. Nevertheless, I apologize, folks. I hate to interrupt, but I've got crazy things going on the computer screen here. I don't know what to think of it. It's a distraction. But nevertheless, you've got, where was I? He deceives those who dwell on the earth. Verse 14. By those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So here you have one beast, the second beast, gratifying and exalting the first beast, right? He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand and on the foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Now I want to nip this in the bud real quick. Whether you believe me or not, makes no difference to me. You go and you study it for yourself. But verse 18 is just as simple as verse 11 and verse 1, chapter 13. The number, the name, the image is of the beast. It's not of God. It is of man, not of God. Same thing you have in verse 1. The beast that John sees, the first beast, comes up out of the sea, not out of heaven. That's as contrasted with heaven. It comes from the sea. The other beast, in verse 11, comes up from the land, the earth, not from heaven. All right? Verse 18 is just as simple. Don't have to put any more thought into it than that. These are human entities, groups, movements. I said already, chapter 12, the dragon that fights against the woman, that tries to destroy the woman, and then it tries to devour the man child that the woman was bringing forth, and then goes to make war with the remnant of her seed who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. That dragon is an entity, and that entity is of man. Same with this first beast in chapter 13 and verse 1 and verses 1 through 10. Same type. It's not from heaven. It is of man. The dragon, a false god, a false Yahweh. There is no such thing as a false Yahweh. Yahweh is the name of God. There's one and only. But he is a false God. Then there is the false Christ, just like Jesus said they were coming in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. They were coming. Here it is. A description of false Christs. One of his heads is wounded, as if it would die. But then it still lives. It's just like Christ. A counterfeit Christ is what it is. There's a false resurrection there. And it's duping the people. It's fooling them. So, what do we have in verse 11 and following? You've got a false God, a false Christ. What comes next? Well, he's obviously not a false Holy Spirit, is he? In a general sense, maybe, but I'm going to go further and say, because of the things that he does and who he upholds and who he's preaching, he is a false apostle, a false prophet, just as it's called in chapter 16 and verse 13. He is a false apostle, or they are false apostles. It's the false apostolic movement. What does that have? Strong meaning today, but that's what's taking place here. You've got the false God and the dragon, then you've got the false Christ in this beast of the sea, and then you've got this false apostle or false preacher in verse 11, chapter 13, the beast of the earth. He speaks like a dragon. Note this, verse 1. He had two horns like a lamb. So he has an appearance of a lamb. An appearance, a peaceful appearance. Maybe an appearance like the lamb. Well, that's what the church is it not? Are they not the image of Christ. 2 Corinthians 3:18, and then also 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. But he speaks like a dragon. What dragon is he talking about? Chapter 12, verse 3. That fiery red dragon. Oh, he's got the appearance of being a true apostle, a true preacher, a true prophet. We'll just call it like Revelation calls him. He's a false prophet. He's got the appearance of a true prophet. But what's coming out of his mouth does not match his appearance. Because here he is speaking like the dragon. The dragon is anti-Yahweh, anti-Christ, anti-seed of the woman. This dragon he is the villain in this picture. Well, here is the propagator of this wicked doctrine right here, this false prophet. He speaks like the dragon. Paul, James, John, Matthew, Peter, all of those apostles did what? They spoke as Christ. Because it was the Holy Spirit that bore them along. Okay? You got a wicked spirit, an evil spirit, bearing these along. Whether it's 1 or 50, however many it were. Look back in 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 13, you're going to find out Paul warned them about false apostles. Jesus called them false prophets. They were going to come in Jesus' name. But what they were going to be speaking was going to be totally different than what Jesus was preaching. And that's what's taking place here. He looks like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. Having the form of godliness, but he's denying the power thereof. And he exercises all authority of the first beast in his presence. What's he doing? He's upholding the authority of the first beast. He exercises that same authority. He has delegated authority, right? Okay. What was going on? Jesus said, all authority is given unto me in heaven and on earth. And he delegates that authority. Go ye, therefore, and preach. Preach and baptize. Wonder what their parody of baptism was. There's no telling. But nevertheless, this beast exercises all the authority of the first beast. So you've got the false prophet, who is the parody of the true apostles. He causes the earth and those who dwell in it. Remember how we made the distinction back in chapter 12 of the earth dwellers? The distinction between the earth dwellers and those who dwell in heaven. It's going to be mentioned again later on. Those who dwell in heaven are just like I said in Colossians chapter 3. Paul identifies. No, it's Philippians 3, I'm sorry. Their citizenship is in heaven. I know the old King James says conversation, but that's the force of the word that's used there is citizenship. Our citizenship is in the United States, all right? But we as children of God, our citizenship is in heaven. Now, if it was just that simple, so those who dwell on the earth, their citizenship was only wherever it was they were living. Yet we have a dual citizenship. These are the populace. Remember, we had established that earlier in the book. This is just a general populace. The general populace, just like in 1 Kings 18. You had Elijah and his fellow prophets. Then you had Jezebel, Ahab, and their prophets of Baal. Then you had the general populace. Elijah speaks to the general populace. He says, how long are you going to be divided between two opinions? How long halt ye between two opinions. Well, how long are you going to ride the fence? God's God, serve him. But if Baal is God, serve him. Jesus preached the same truth when he said you can't serve God and mammon. Now, as I want to point out here in a little bit, here these folks are serving mammon. But this general populace, those who dwell on the earth, are being deceived. See verse 14? He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and did live. Interesting. Make an image to the beast rather than of the beast. What do we have taking place here? Idolatry. Do you remember what happened as soon as the children of Israel had got to Mount Oreb and Mount Sinai, and Moses goes up on the mountain? God wants to meet with him face to face. Moses goes up on the mountain. Thanks Exodus 33, 34. What happens down at the bottom of the mountain? The foot of the mountain. These people seem to think Moses has gone up there and disappeared. Maybe he was burnt to a crisp. We have no one to lead us now. Aaron, do something about this. So Aaron says, bring me your gold. I'll take care of this problem. And what's Aaron do? Well, he melts the gold, fashions it into a golden calf. Moses and Joshua come down from the mountain. And what's going on? Joshua says it's like the noise of war in the camp. And Moses says, that ain't the noise of war. That's not the voice, the noise, the sound of war. That's the sound of a festival. That's the sound of rejoicing. And they get down to the bottom of the mountain. They see what's going on. Everybody's dancing around, possibly naked, around this golden calf. They're having just a good old happy time, worshiping, serving this false god. Moses breaks 2 tablets. What is going on here with this false prophet? The same concept. He's counseling these folks to make an image to the beast. But look how he says. Look at verse 15. He, that's the beast of the earth, was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. There's that parody all over again. There's the counterfeit right there. The apostles and prophets of the New Testament did what? They preached and taught Christ. What's this false prophet doing? Exactly the opposite. Preaching and teaching the beast, the false Christ. It's almost as if they said, look, if we let this man alone, then all the world's going to go after him. And then the Romans are going to come, and they're going to take away both our place and our nation. You see what I'm saying? It's almost as if they said, well, we see this is working and it's swaying the hearts of the people. Let's see what we can do. So that's what they did. They got together. They put their heads together. They come up with this false god. Then this beast is working on a false resurrection, false wonders, just like Paul said in 2 Thessalonians 2. Lying signs and false wonders. Lying signs and wonders, which were false signs and wonders. That's what he's doing here. And so this prophet who is trying to make the image speak and make the image be worshipped, And then the proclamation goes out, if you don't do this, you're going to be killed. So he's granting authority to the image. And when that takes place, look what happens. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave. You would contrast that to Galatians chapter 3, around about. Let's jump over there real quick. Galatians chapter 3, starting in verse 26. For you are all the sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. You're all one in Christ Jesus. Well, here's the uniting of all of these different castes of people under the image of the beast. Doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. You're not doing anything except you have the mark of the beast, as he says here. He's trying to make this image of this beast speak. This is a miracle, a wonder, a sign, a supernatural power that he's trying to work to pull the wool over the people's eyes so that they'll worship the dragon and worship the beast. See, the first beast, the beast of the sea, causes all to worship him and the dragon. All right? So if this false prophet causes all to worship the first beast, the beast of the sea, and he's doing so by proxy to the dragon as well. Just as Christians, when they preach and teach the gospel, someone obeys the gospel, they're glorifying Christ, which in turn is glorifying God the Father, is it not? Yes. Excuse me. And so the parody goes on. They can't do anything. They cannot participate in their walk of life unless they receive that mark. You can't buy or sell. Look at verse 17. Except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. That has specific connotations to it. And as we're going to see later on when we look at verse, I keep on saying verse, at chapter 18, Joel chapter 17 and 18, after all the vials, the bowls of God's wrath have been poured out on that place, then Babylon falls. All the merchants and mighty people, the uppity rich people, they're lamenting and crying out in sorrow over that great city, Mystery Babylon, because they were made so rich from her buying and selling. Old King James calls it traffic. But the commerce that was taking place in that city, they weep and lament over it. Now the means of their riches are gone. I believe that's what that's referring to. Excuse me. These folks have mammon as their God. Not God or Christ, but mammon. That's why he says, here's wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. Well, if you want to go get into the numbers of gematria, as they call it, I apologize. My throat's bad right now. A letter for a number and so on and so forth, and calculate it up like Philip Schaff and so many others have done this. You go right ahead. I think you're going the wrong direction, but that's fine. That's my understanding of this. I'm telling you, I think it's just as simple as verse 1 and verse 11 is in the same chapter. It's the number of a man. It's not the number of God. Why complicate this? Yet so many do. They want to read too much into the details. Now, I'm not saying that you're committing a sin if you go and you look up how the Hebrew letters of somebody's name correspond with a number, and then you take each letter, the number corresponding to it, you add them all up, you come up. I'm not saying you're sinning. What I'm saying is it's a futile effort, because it's so plain and simple the way John puts this. Now, whatever 6 and 6 and 6 stood for back then, whatever. Makes me no difference. I'm not worried about it today. Other than the concept of this wickedness that John is describing through this vision. Because it still exists today. Does the dragon exist today? No. Does the sea beast exist today? No. Does the land beast or earth beast? No. John said these things were shortly to take place. Revelation 19, both of these beasts in chapter 13, they're destroyed. Revelation 20, the dragon, he's destroyed as well. I apologize. And it's just as simple as the way he puts it. It's the number of a man. This number, which represents the mark, represents mankind or any man, not God. It's the exact opposite of God. Not that mankind is the exact opposite of God, but excuse me, you cannot partake in your commerce, your traffic, unless you have not you, but they back then had the name of the mark of the beast. And that describes his great authority that he holds sway over the people with. Not Christians. Not Christians. Just for that sake right there, read on into chapter 14. Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his Father's name written on their foreheads. Excuse me. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, like the voice of thunder, and I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They said, oh, thank you, sir. They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the living creatures, before the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. Where did that second beast come from? These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. That speaks of their purity, by the way. We'll get into that when we get to the next chapter. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruit to God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they were without fault before the throne of God. What's it describing? The opposite of what we see in verse 14 of chapter 13. Those who dwell on the earth, these folks are taking the image, the mark. And with this mark, they're exalting this image, and they're exalting this beast, and they're exalting this dragon. They're doing all these things when they should be exalting God the Father and God the Son. But they have taken this false, this counterfeit group, and they've run with it. They've started serving it. Excuse me. These are those who have not taken that mark of the beast. They have their Father's name written in their forehead, not the mark of the beast. So it's that simple. I know. Trust me, I get it. It is so intriguing to try to figure out, just because the New King James says calculate. Old King James says count. And it carries the idea of one who were counting things by placing pebbles in a bucket or whatever back then. Not to get into all that, but the idea of that word count is to discern. Discern the number of the beast. And discern the fact that it's not the number of God. Okay? It's not the number of deity. It's the number of man. Therefore, this authority that it's given is of man and not of God. I realize I didn't go into great detail on this. I've got limited time. It's 11 o'clock already. Just something to consider, especially for those out there that are worried, literally worried sick to death of the idea of a beast or dragon and a false prophet swaying the hearts of any today in the biblical manner so that it would be fulfilling prophecy. As I've stated and as we read, John said they're shortly to take place. So the beast, the dragon, or the dragon and the two beasts that John is describing, not for our time. Frog in my throat or something. Oh, speaking of which, that's in chapter 14. Not going to get into that. But nevertheless, I wonder if that's where that comes from. That's actually chapter 16. I saw out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. I don't have that kind of frog in my throat right now, okay? I'm just trying to get us to look at and understand this in a practical manner so that we don't have to be scared walking around all day. You know, all these people out there saying that, well, you got most of the conservatives out there saying, well, Obama, he's the Antichrist. Then you got whatever, liberals or whatever, even some conservatives, well, Trump, he's the Antichrist now. Well, does that mean the others were wrong when Obama was in office? You know, you had plenty of them, trust me. Plenty of them saying that back during Hitler's day. And it is recorded. There are secondary applications we can make from this today, obviously. We could look at anything that is anti. The word anti does not necessarily mean exact opposite, but it does also mean like unto. So this is both and, in a sense. It is not God the Father, it is not God the Son, and it is not the apostles. But it is in fact the opposite, even though it's like them. This movement we have here in chapters 12 and 13. Details will be revealed later on in the later chapters concerning this movement that we have taken place here. And that movement was what? It was for the purpose of persecution. That's the last verses of chapter 12. The dragon saw that he'd been cast to the earth. He doesn't have his exalted position anymore, not in heaven. No, he's been cast down to the earth. He's been abased. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given wings of an eagle. She may fly out into the wilderness where she's got a place prepared of God, right? She hasn't escaped. God made an escape. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth. Who's the serpent? John changed subjects here? No, he's already said it's the dragon. Spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. He's trying to get rid of the woman. But God protects her by means of the earth. The earth helps the woman. So the dragon in verse 17 of chapter 12 is mad. He's wroth. He's angry. He's fiery mad. enraged, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring. He can't get to the woman, so he's going to go after her children. But even that is thwarted, because the way chapter 14 starts out with. They're standing on Mount Zion with the Lord. Or actually, a lamb. Verse 1 of chapter 14. There's a victory here. They've gotten the victory over the beast because they didn't take his mark. And they didn't profess his name. They didn't buy into that false gospel. But they resisted it. And they were steadfast and strong, holding on to that unchanging hand, and not just flowing with traffic. They stood out. That's why they were standing on Mount Zion. They didn't take the mark. Does that mean they couldn't buy or sell? Does that mean they could not partake in that type of lifestyle? Yes, they could. Even without the mark. You got enough people that stand up and say, "Nuh-uh, we're not taking it." They're eventually going to find respite somewhere. And they're going to establish their own economy. But this has to do with a specific type of economy. Now think about it. Right here, between chapter 13 and chapter 14, you got two choices. You got the dragon, or actually the beast from the sea, or you got Christ. You got the dragon, or you got Yahweh. You choose. What's in between that choice? A mark. Because those who stand with the Lamb also have a mark. Remember when we studied that with Ezekiel chapter 10? Ezekiel 9 and 10? They've got a mark. But this mark is distinguished from that mark, obviously. Who do you worship and serve? Who is your mind fixate? Who do you meditate on? Right? Mark in the forehead. Who do what you do, your works, your actions, who does it glorify? If it glorifies yourself, you've taken the mark of the beast. If it glorifies God, you've got the mark of the Lord on you. That's the way they understood it. I also believe that it denotes the intended audience. And it's an Israelite, a Jewish audience in mind here. Because that mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, verse 16, corresponds to a specific type of mark that the Jews were to place on themselves, but not in the most literal fashion as they took it. Meditate upon the Lord. The book of remembrance was written for those who feared the Lord and meditated upon His word, His name. And let all that you do be in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks unto God the Father through Him. Everything you do in word and deed, glorify Him. Not yourself, not others, but Him. That Lamb standing on Mount Zion. Matthew 23. I want to point something out. I want to point some similarities out, actually. Jesus is pronouncing woes upon the scribes. That's a Pharisee and a scribe together, in case you're wondering. Pharisees and the scribes and Pharisees, as he calls them. In Matthew 23 and verse 2, he says, the scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Really? They've kept Moses' seat around all that time. You mean to tell me there's some weird seat that they've kept since way back when Moses was sitting and judging the 12 tribes of Israel? And they've kept it that long? Obviously not. It's a position of authority. They have Moses' authority. Remember how Jesus said one greater than Moses is here? Think about that. With that in mind. Therefore, he says, whatever they tell you to observe, whatever they tell you to practice, that practice and do. But do not do according to their works. Why not? Because they say and do not. All right, you get the idea of the hypocrisy of these scribes here, these scribes and Pharisees. For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's backs or men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. Kind of like a mark, isn't it? But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at the feasts, the best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi, or Rabbi, Rabbi. Image. Yep. Look what Jesus says. But you don't be called Rabbi. For one is your teacher, the Christ. You're all brethren. Do not call anyone on earth your father. Wow. No, I'm not going to. It says enough without even having to exegete what Jesus is getting at there. You don't call anyone on earth your father. Does that mean I can't call my daddy my father? No. Look what he says. One is your father, he who is in heaven. He, singular, right? There's only one true God, right? Is that not what Jesus is saying here? There's one Father. The Father in heaven. Jesus says, my Father is your Father. And there's only one. So what does that tell you that those people were doing? Well, they were giving too much honor to men, wasn't they? Yeah. Don't be called teachers, for one is your teacher. I guess a better translation of this would be master. Teacher, not so much, but master. Why master? But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. What's Jesus getting out there? The exaltation. You're giving each other titles, and you're calling each other by these titles, and the ones that are getting called the titles are just all kinds of puffed up and arrogant. And they're hypocrites. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. You can't do stuff without this mark. For neither you go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive the greater condemnation. How are they devouring widows' houses? Oh, that's taking all their money. Remember the widow and the two mites? Yeah. She gave all her living, didn't she? Oh, and they gladly took it, didn't they? Devouring widows' houses for a pretense, making long prayers. He's not done yet. Woe to you, Pharisees and scribes. I almost said scribes again. Pharisees. There's a good one. For you travel land and sea to win one a proselyte. And when he's won, you make him twice the son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple is nothing. Whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he's obliged to perform it. What were they exalting over the temple? Jesus just told you. The gold. Oh, he's not done yet. Fools and blind, which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whoever, this is another thing they say, whoever swears by the altar, it's nothing, but whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he's obliged to perform it. Notice how that is equivalent to debt with the gold. Fools and blind, which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and all things on it. You see the idea here? Sanctification. He who swears by the temple swears by it and him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it. See the conclusion that Jesus is trying to guide them back to? You got it all wrong, he says. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. This should have been your focus, he says. Blind guides who strain a gnat, swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, you cleanse the outside of the cup and the dish, and inside they're full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness, doing all of these things to be seen of men. There's your idea of an image. But see the sway that they held over the people, both in pretense and in image. See how they required the people's gold and the people's gifts and acted like they were the type that would do even better and even greater. Remember Luke 18? That Pharisee that stood in the temple with the publican, the tax collector. I thank thee, God, that I'm not like other men, even like this publican over here. I do all of this and all of that, and blah, blah, blah. But the publican, the tax collector, had the right idea, and he says, God, be merciful to me. I'm a sinner. That's all he did. That's all he had to say. Not these hypocrites. They did all this to uphold their image. In upholding that image, they were upholding the image of the beast. Doing the exact thing that John is seeing in his vision. They were upholding that image. So here's wisdom. That beast is the number of his name is the number of a man, not God. Not God. It was Solomon who collected 636,000 talents, I believe, or 666 talents of gold. I should have wrote my reference down, but I didn't. I apologize. But you go back and you look how much gold, how much wealth that Solomon had collected, and during his reign, his first year of reign, I believe, if I remember the record right. 666 talents. They did these things by weight. So, just imagine number of that earthly king. Just saying, something to consider. Because when John says these things are at hand, and they're shortly to come to pass, you and I, as Christians, and we, as Bible preachers and teachers, have no right to take anything, the millennium, as people want to call it, 1,000 years, anything within it, the binding of Satan, the destruction of the false prophet and the beast, out of its time frame, and place it in our own. But there are plenty of hypocrites out there doing it. Why? They want to uphold their image, which is not the image of God. You keep padding their bank account, and they're good with it. I've heard some of them say they don't even care what you believe. That's sad. That's very sad. That's pathetic. It's just as pathetic as this beast of the sea and this beast of the earth. Same concept. Don't care what you do, just follow me. Everything's good. Because as long as you're following me, all of your riches, verse 17, they come to me. Nobody else. I see a lot of Matthew 23 in Revelation 13. And believe me, it's 11:20. There are so many passages we could go to and see this same concept taking place. And I believe that's exactly what John is describing from the vision, using a figurative means. The beast stands for this. These horns stand for that. Heaven stands for this. Earth stands for that. So on and so forth. We'll just keep that sort of concept in mind. Won't be a problem, will it? These things kind of fall into place. And we won't have such a hard time understanding what this or that is. We just keep it rather general. I know there's some good old details in here that just taste so good to chew on, but don't choke on them. So we'll conclude this last portion of chapter 13 right now. Next week we want to pick up in chapter 14. I'd like to speed up because what I just said about not choking on the details, I want to be careful and not slowing down too much. I did slow down earlier, and my speed's been up and down as we're going through this, but I want to make sure I get some points across. And I want to emphasize what this should have meant to them through a 21st century lenses, and I'm not wearing my glasses right now, but looking through the eyes of a 21st century understanding, trying to look back and gain an understanding of how they viewed a symbol. What earth meant to them, what heaven meant to them, and when they were combined, what it meant to them. What beast was like in their minds. What still waters meant to them. And so we just read about some in Matthew 23, those phylacteries, little boxes that they'd wrap on their arm, put on their forehead, walk around looking like they got one horn sticking out their head. I won't go into that, but and that was symbolic of something. It was meant to be symbolic of having God's law written on their hearts and working God's law, working it out by what they do with their hands. It was representative, figurative. And I believe if we go through this book of Revelation, finish it the same way, we're going to gain the understanding that they had of it. And it won't be such a mystery to us today because it's been revealed. That's what the word means. Revelation, apocalypsis, it means unveiling, revealing, taking the cover off of something and saying, there it is right there. You see it just in high definition, just plain Jane. I believe we can do the same thing. We can draw patterns and concepts and principles out of this book and behold how they're taking place in our lives today, but not the details. John said those details were reserved for his time. So with that, I want to conclude. And like I said, next time we'll start up in chapter 14. May the Lord bless you and keep you.